You're listening to Sim Wonton from BizSupportOnline.net. In this InfoPath video, you'll learn a quick and dirty way to add images as attachments to SharePoint list items without having to write code. Here I'm in SharePoint 2010, where I've got this my list SharePoint list that contains these 5 SharePoint list items. The basic idea is that I want to use an InfoPath form to attach images to any one of these list items. Here I'm in InfoPath Designer 2010, where I've already pre-created an InfoPath form template that has a drop-down list box control on it, a text box control, and this button control. The only functionality that I have already added to this form template is I've added a data connection to the my list SharePoint list, and I've bound this drop-down list box to that data source, with the ID filling the value field and the title filling the display name field. So if I preview the form, you'll see that it'll display the 5 SharePoint list items. What I would have to do now is I would have to add a data connection to a web service, the list web service in this case, with which I can add attachments to a SharePoint list item. So I'm going to add a data connection, and I'll select the add attachment operation. I'll leave all these parameters as is, and then I'll deselect this checkbox. Then I'll add a picture control here so that we can select images. I'll include it in the form, and I'll call it attachment. Then I'll start adding rules to this button control. I'll add one action rule with a couple of actions. And the first action is going to set the value of the list name, which is the GUID of the SharePoint list, the my list SharePoint list, which you can retrieve from SharePoint. Then I'll add a second action rule that sets the value of the list item ID, and that should be equal to the selected item from the drop-down list box in the main data source, which is that list item ID there. And then I'll add another action that sets the value of this file name field to be equal to the text box, which is this file name field in the main data source. And finally, I'll add a last action rule that sets the value of this attachment field to be equal to the value of the picture control in the main data source. And then we'll query the data source. And that is all I should require to be able to add images to these SharePoint list items. So what I'll do next is I'll publish the form template to SharePoint. Already added a SharePoint form library called attachlib there. Once published, we'll switch to SharePoint, and then we'll go to the attachlib SharePoint form library and add a document. And then here I'll select the SharePoint list item. Let's take item number 3, and I'll attach cookbook 3 image, which is this one, and I'll call it InfoPath 2010 cookbook 3.jpg, and then I'll click add attachment, and then I'll just close the form, and we'll go to the my list SharePoint list. And then as you can see, it has an attachment here. If I open the item and then click on the attachment, you'll see that the image will appear. I can repeat the process and add a second attachment to that same SharePoint list item. This time I'll add the image for cookbook 5. So I'll call this InfoPath 2010 Cookbook 5.jpg. Click Add Attachment, close the form again, and then go to the My List SharePoint list. Open item 3, and then you'll see that we've got two attachments now attached to this item 3. So if I click Cookbook 5, you'll see that the image for Cookbook 5 will appear. I can repeat the process again and select a different item. This time let's take item 5, and I'll attach image for InfoPath 2013 Cookbook. And then click Add Attachment, close the form again, and then when we go to the My List SharePoint list, you'll see that we've got an attachment on this item 5, and it is InfoPath 2013 Cookbook. This solution also works with file attachment controls, but with file attachment controls you will have to write code similar to the technique I discussed in recipe 98 of InfoPath 2010 Cookbook 3 or InfoPath 2010 Cookbook 4.